Truman Show is a film that almost everyone knows. Truman, who has a job, a home, and a beloved wife, lives on a very beautiful island. However, the truth is that the life Truman believed to be real was actually an artificial studio built for him. And for 30 years every minute it has been broadcast live to the entire world. He never suspected this until one day he saw his father, whom he thought was dead, among the crowd passing on the street. But hold on tight. Before this film was even released in theaters in Japan, there was a real-life Truman known by the nickname Nasubi. It was 1998, and every week more than 15 million people would sit in front of their screens to watch him. In this real-life reality show, unaware that he was being recorded, this man pushed the limits of his physical and psychological endurance, while people found themselves watching him with insane pleasure. Nasubi, completely naked with his genitals covered by an eggplant emoji, was broadcast live 24/7, oblivious to everything. His story was strange and equally disturbing. In January 1998, dozens of young amateur comedians in their early 20s, seeking a way into the television world, gathered at a small casting office in Tokyo. A producer named Toshio Sui entered the room and told them that the only thing they needed for these auditions was luck. It sounded strange, but none of them had any idea what they were auditioning for. Then a box with a large red question mark was brought into the room, and they were asked to draw a card from. The winner was Tomaki Hamat, nicknamed Nasubi. The name Nasubi means eggplant in Japanese, a nickname he had since childhood because of his long face. Pursuing a career in the entertainment industry, 22-year-old Nasubi had moved to Tokyo after high school to become a comedian, and he hoped that this program would somehow change his life. Little did he know at that moment he was about to become the star of what would turn into one of the strangest and most humiliating shows in television history. Immediately after the auditions, Nasubi was blindfolded by producer Toshio and put into a car. Though he didn't know where he was being taken, he was quite excited. What he didn't know was that he had actually auditioned for a survival reality show called Susundea Shonen. The program featured young people aspiring to succeed in show business, participating in numerous harsh and absurd survival challenges. When Nasubi's blindfold was removed, he found himself in a small apartment, sparsely furnished with a table, a small cushion, a shelf filled with magazines, and a camera filming him 24 hours a day. Shortly after entering the room, he was ordered to strip completely naked. At first, he was a bit surprised, but then he removed all his clothes and handed them to the producer. At this point, still unaware of everything, he was told that he was in an entertainment program and that he would have to earn everything he needed for survival: food, clothing, and other necessities through sweepstakes in the magazines. In the late 1990s, Japan was in the midst of a sweepstakes craze. Magazines were filled with contests offering everything imaginable: vacuum cleaners, a year's supply of rice, bicycles, and posters of movie stars. People joked that one could survive only on sweepstakes winnings. The program aimed to test whether a person could survive solely on prizes. The total value of the prizes Nasubi won in sweepstakes would eventually reach 1 million yen, roughly equivalent to $8,000 at the time, after which he would be free to leave. Until then, he had to remain completely isolated from the outside world, and apart from occasional checks by the producers, he would have no human contact. He was also told that his life would be recorded on camera and later edited into a program, though most of the footage would not be broadcast. Unfortunately, none of this was true. The producers were playing a trick to make Nasubi behave more naturally. Unlike typical game shows, where contestants compete knowingly in front of cameras, his footage was broadcast on television every Sunday evening without his knowledge or consent. Nasubi quickly became Japan's most famous television personality. Because he was completely naked, a large animated eggplant followed him around to censor his genitals. The program aimed to create a sense of extreme loneliness and disconnection, testing viewers' endurance. The apartment consisted of an air conditioner, radio, telephone, gas stove, a large magazine shelf, a small table with a massive pile of postcards, a toilet, and a shower. However, Nasubi had no food, clothing, or bed to sleep on. As mentioned earlier, he had to survive by entering as many magazine sweepstakes as possible and using the prizes he won. He began sending postcards for sweepstakes, hoping to get out as soon as possible. However, after writing an estimated 1,400 postcards per week, he didn't seem to be having much fun. His days in the tiny room were truly extraordinary. For the first 2 weeks, he mostly wrote in the diary given to him, listened to the radio, and practiced handstands. All the while, he waited for someone to contact him and tell him that he had won something. After 2 weeks, the door finally rang for the first time. Holding his only possible blanket, the cushion, against his groin, he opened the door. The man at the door told him he had won some fruit juice worth 1,560 yen, and that he still needed to win another 998,440 yen. A few days later, the door rang again. On the brink of starvation, the producers had sent someone with food to anger him and measure his reaction. Nasubi was excited until the man asked for money. He explained that he had none, but the man claimed he might have delivered the food to the wrong address and took it back. After this incident, he heard himself talking to himself at the table, frustrated. On February 22nd, he envisioned his next prize, 5 kilograms of rice. He was so hungry that every rib was visible. The rice arrived, but there was no pot or pan to cook it in. He tried eating it raw, then attempted to make it edible by putting rice and water into an empty juice container overnight. It didn't work. Then he lit the stove and left the container next to it. After 3 hours, he managed to make semi-cooked rice porridge, though he had to eat. With pencils as chopsticks, Nasubi was extremely happy. At the end of the first month, he still had many sweepstakes to win and wrote even more postcards. He thought that nobody would see him, and that writing 9 hours of postcards daily wouldn't be interesting enough for television. What he didn't know was that millions across Japan were following his struggle every Sunday night. At that time, reality TV shows quickly gained fame by subjecting contestants to sadistic tests, and other contestants faced various survival challenges. Time passed slowly for Nasubi. At this rate, finishing the competition would take about 40 months. However, the program's ratings were so high that this worked in the producer's favor. Nevertheless, whenever he won something, he celebrated with great excitement, and even small victories felt like winning the lottery. Over the next few months, things started to improve slightly for him. Out of over 10,000 sweepstakes he entered, some finally worked. However, many of the prizes, food, clothes, and hygiene items, were useless. Without a signal, he couldn't connect to a television. He won a giant poster of a famous actor, a huge tent, car tires, cinema tickets, and a bicycle he could never use. His only clothing was a black women's underwear and a plush toy he named Sensei, with whom he began talking. One of his happiest moments during this period, when he had no personal hygiene items, was winning a toothbrush and toothpaste. However, this happiness was short-lived. Internally, Nasubi was breaking apart. Isolation and hunger caused him to start losing touch with reality, constantly teetering between sanity and madness. Sometimes he laughed uncontrollably or talked to himself, giving the impression he was losing his mind. This deep loneliness, abandonment, and helplessness turned every day into a psychological battle. One of the most stressful aspects was the indefinite duration of his imprisonment. He didn't know when he would leave or if he would ever reach the 1 million yen goal. Physically, he began losing weight, and his nails, hair, and beard fell into disrepair. Once his rice ran out, he survived on dog food. Yes, you read that correctly. People watched him survive on dog food and other bizarre items with fascination. In May, a doctor was sent to check on Nasubi. Despite his clearly deteriorating chest condition, The doctor stated he was not suffering from malnutrition or starvation, but the program was so popular that paparazzi and fans began exposing the location of his apartment. Initially, one might think they intended to help him, but in reality they only wanted to watch him, to catch a glimpse through the window or watch him celebrate a prize in real time. It sounded cruel. One night, the producers blindfolded him again and moved him 5 hours away to a different apartment. They told him it was for a fresh start, but actually it was to prevent him from knowing that an audience was watching and that he was still on television. By the end of the first month in the new apartment, he had won a rice pot, a PlayStation, and several games, giving him something to occupy his time. Perhaps as the producers had promised, his luck was finally changing. In July, the producers decided to take the show to the next level. Due to the program's popularity, they wanted Nasubi to broadcast 24/7 live access, so fans could watch at any time. This unprecedented decision transformed him into not just a contestant, but a constant object of observation, pushing ethical and personal boundaries to extremes. A large team ensured his genitals remained censored with the eggplant emoji. Millions watched the live feed, eager to see his unfiltered, odd behavior. Until this point, some thought it was all staged, but the live broadcast convinced everyone of its reality. In August, Nasubi didn't win a single sweepstake, and in September, most of what he did win was useless. Perhaps his only happy moment that month was a day on the beach, still naked. By December, 335 days had passed since he first entered the apartment. While writing postcards, a small bag of rice arrived. Unbeknownst to him, it was the final piece to reach the 1 million yen goal. He had no idea of his total winnings until that night when producers told him he would celebrate by going to South Korea. He dressed and traveled to South Korea, where he enjoyed freedom, luxurious food, and a fun day at an amusement park. He had changed significantly. His speech had slowed, his hair and beard had grown long, and clothes felt itchy and hot after months of being naked. This new life thrilled him. As he had now become both a national sensation and earned a decent income, producers were satisfied with the ratings. They then assigned him another challenge, to win a ticket back to Japan through sweepstakes. Nasubi initially refused, but the producers persuaded him after 3 hours. After months of torture and deprivation, just when he felt relief, he had to live in isolation and scarcity again. The added difficulty of entering foreign sweepstakes made things even more extreme. At one point, he considered that death might be the only escape, but could not bring himself to do it. Instead, he persevered. Nasubi became a sweepstakes professional, and after a few weeks won enough prizes to obtain a ticket. However, the producers changed the rules, forcing him to win a first-class ticket. If you think it ended there, it didn't. The most disturbing finale followed. On March 28, 1999, when he returned to Japan, he was placed in another apartment resembling the previous ones. Desperate, Nasubi was rendered almost unresponsive. Suddenly, the walls collapsed, and it turned out that the apartment was actually in the middle of a film studio. Hundreds of spectators cheered wildly, and 2 hosts ran to him shouting, "Congratulations, you won!" Nasubi, holding only his cushion, stood completely naked and horrified.
Nasubi 君の姿を皆さんは 毎週毎週テレビで見てたの。あんた知らなかった？
いや、だってオンエアされてないっていうか、放送とかそういうのされてないって私は聞きながらやってたんですけど。
毎週見てたよ、なすびくんを。みんな知ってるのよ。
この人たちなんですか？じゃあみんな俺の裸見てるんですか、毎週。
なすびくんがずーっと1年3ヶ月ずっと当選の前にした食べられないドッグフードを食べた、そういうのも全部見てたのよ、みんな。
は？うわ、それはちょっとまずいんじゃないんですか。
His diary was published and became a bestseller, but none of it registered with him. After 15 months, everything he thought he knew was false, and he couldn't comprehend reality. Nasubi had spent 15 months alone in an apartment, naked, with minimal food, and almost no way to occupy himself. On top of that, knowing every moment was being broadcast live was deeply distressing. He faced enormous challenges, dealing with the psychological effects of loneliness, deprivation, and public exposure. It took him years to regain normal speech, and it took a year to get used to wearing clothes without discomfort. One of the most astonishing facts of the show is that Nasubi's apartment door was never locked. Theoretically, he could leave any time, but he never considered it.
逃げる気になれば逃げられたっちゃ逃げられた。確かに外鍵は閉められてなかったんですよ、正直。精神的にもうそこで逃げたりとか何か大きなことを起こすよりも、そこの空間の中で波風立てずに今生きていることが一番安全なんじゃないっていうような変な心理状態だった。その逃げる気力も失う。
The producers have never expressed regret for what they did, but Nasubi, despite all these challenges, entered the world of comedy and acting and built a new life. He dedicated much of his earnings to charity and rebuilding his hometown Fukushima after the 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and subsequent nuclear disaster, raising awareness through acts such as climbing Mount Everest. This show raises deep questions about the ethics of entertainment and deriving perverse pleasure from others' suffering. To my knowledge, there is no other television event in the world where human rights are so blatantly violated under the guise of competition. If you were in Nasubi's place, how would you have reacted? Take care, and see you next time.